All right, title of the paper is, Do Feelings of Ownership Explain Giving and Taking in Dictator Games? Two co-authors, Ola Kornock and Laura Razzolini. Short line is, we think that feelings of ownership help us understand better when people give or when they fail to take. Here's an outline of the paper. First, I'm going to present a puzzle. We see differences in experiments that report outcomes on giving and taking experiments. We wonder why. Other authors have already suggested a possible explanation. It deals with property rights. We see a link between what economists refer to as property rights and what psychologists call feelings of ownership, and I actually think feelings of ownership may be a better descriptor of what is really happening here. I'll talk to them about what feeling of ownership is, then I'm going to describe the design of our experiment, the results, and present some potential and very preliminary implications for charitable giving and philanthropies. And if you have questions, please raise your hand. I'll try to look up at you so I may see it. So here's the puzzle. This table shows four sets of experiments. Each of these experiments has a giving frame and a taking frame. The first two rows show the giving and taking. The percentages reported are the percentage of an endowment the recipient gets at the end of the experiment. So the first two rows show that the percentages received by the recipient are pretty similar. The row for, we'll get to that in a second. Second one is a paper by Kornock, Millner, Razzolini. We find significant differences. The percentage received by the recipient is higher in the taking game than in the giving game. And then we get to Oxaby and Sparagon. They find dramatic differences. So how can you go from some experiments doing what at least they're talking about pretty much the same kind of experimental differences. In one case, you get very little difference. In some cases, you get some differences. In another case, you get really big differences. Let's look a little more at how the experiments were conducted. Dreber, Ellenson, Johansson, and Rand had either a giving game or a taking game. Participants took part in either a giving game or a taking game. The dictator was given an envelope. One envelope said you on the outside of it. The other said other person. The envelope contained 10 $1 bills. In the giving game, they had to move money from the U envelope to other. So the $10 started off in the U envelope, and you could move money to the other one. In the taking game, you had to move money from the other envelope to you. The other envelope started off with the $10 in it. They said they expected the dictator to be averse to taking and to be concerned about violating others' entitlement, which implies that the percentage to the recipient would be higher in the taking game than the giving game. Again, the percentages were 18.8% in the taking game and 22.7% in the giving game, which goes the wrong way from their sort of hypothesis. The difference is not significant, and they were running a between subjects design. Grossman and Eckel have an initial allocation. It's a piece of paper that says initial allocation is 20 for you, 0 for charity. That's the giving game. The taking game is the initial allocation is 0 for you and 20 for charity, and the participant had to write on that decision sheet the final allocation. How much money of that 20 would go to me or to the other person. The charity earned 30% when the initial allocation favored the dictator, and 36.7% when the initial allocation favored the charity. Again, the difference was not significant. Another between subject design. Percentages are higher here than in the first paper, and that's consistent with what we see when you're doing a dictator game in the lab as opposed to a dictator game using real charities. Kornock, Millner, and Razzolini. We confront subjects or dictators with either a giving scenario or a taking scenario. In the giving scenario, the dictator has $20 and may give to the recipient. In the taking scenario, the recipient has $20 and the dictator may take. The recipient earned 31.6% in the taking and 21.4% in the giving scenario. The difference is significant. And again, this is a within subject design. We use the strategy choice method. The dictators confronted 9 different choices, and we're comparing right now the two sort of extremes where the dictator either has all of the income or the recipient either starts off with all the endowment. Oxaby and Sparagon. They have either a giving game or a taking game. In their game, either the dictator earned an endowment by answering a series of quiz questions, and they could earn they either earn $10, $20, or $40, or in the taking game, the recipient earned the endowment. So the dictator learned what either he or she had earned, or what the other participant had earned, and then made a decision whether to give some of that earning to the recipient, or whether to take some of what the other participant had earned back for themselves. The recipient earned 49% in the taking game and 0% in the giving game. Absolutely no one of the dictators who earned their endowment gave money in their experiment. The difference is significant. Again, they're running between subject to design, and they also note that in the taking game, the percentage increased with the amount earned. Sort of the thinking is, if you earned a lot, that may be a signal to the dictator that the recipient worked really hard, and therefore maybe I'm not going to take quite as much from you as I might otherwise. Some differences in procedures exist. In the Dreber et al. Paper, dictators are given 2 envelopes. They're not told that the money belonged to them or to the recipients. It's 2 envelopes in their possession in front of them. The question is, where does the money start? But the money's under their control and is there. They open up the envelope, they see everything. Grossman and Eccles, they're given a final allocation. They're given an initial allocation, but are not told the money belonged to them or to charities. They simply have to write 2 numbers on a piece of paper to determine the final allocation. We simply told the dictator that she has $20 or that the recipient has $20, and we said you can give to the recipient or you can take from the recipient. Those are the words that we used. And again, in Oxaby Sparagon, the dictator or the recipient earned the money or not. Yes?
So you said Grossman and Eckel, the recipient was a charity.
Yes.
Were they charities in these other ones, or were they other human?
These are lab, typically, I think in all of them, getting into trouble here now, typically student participants in a lab. So what's going on? Oxaby and Sparagon state, we attribute these decisions to the strength of asset legitimacy in creating property rights among participants, a characteristic of the decision environment which appears to augment other regarding or social preferences. Later on they say, legitimizing assets created property rights that individuals, probably left an S off there, I think, readily observed in dictator games. So the notion is that if I earn the income, it's mine, and I'm much more reluctant to give it away. And if you earn the money, I'll respect that. You've got some claim to that you've earned, and I'll respect that claim. Now, we prefer the phrase feelings of ownership, which is something that pops up in the psychology literature, over property rights, although as economists, property rights are near and dear to our hearts. But first of all, property rights implies, in our mind at least, some type of legal status and ability to defend the property. That ability to have a legal claim or to defend property doesn't exist in a lab. For example, my claim to the endowment, or recipient's claim to endowment, is no greater when she earns it than when the dictator earns it. Moreover, subjects in a lab may feel more strongly that the recipient owns the endowment when she earns it. So it's now getting to what's up in my head, what am I feeling? Property rights has this, again, legal connotation. What really matters is what am I thinking up here in my head? What do I feel about who owns this item? So what do psychologists talk about? What do they mean when they talk about feelings of ownership? A nice survey article by Pierce, Kostova, and Dirks gives some definition or definitions. Feelings of ownership is a feeling of possession. I think the thing is mine. The object of experience is having a close connection with self. It's part of my extended self. It's associated with me. It's part of my extended self, best I can do. It includes both cognition, my awareness of it, my thoughts about it, my beliefs regarding it, and affect. The feeling of ownership is a pleasure the feeling of ownership produces pleasure per se, and it's accompanied by a sense of efficacy and competence. The literature seems to say that there are three primary avenues or three primary drivers that tend to create feeling of ownership. First is control, the ability to manipulate or change something. Think about the researchers in this room. In fact, the practitioners have researchers in the room. Do you feel more ownership of your research program, or do you feel more ownership of the direction your research program takes, or the direction that your university takes? I think you feel more ownership about your research program because you can control it. You at least have, you may not be able to control it, but you can certainly influence it. I'll quit there. Intimate knowledge, touching, proximity seems to matter. I've been given one example is, to whom do you feel more ownership of? A graduate student or an undergraduate? With whom do you work more closely? Undergraduates or graduate students? Biologists study, they look at bees, and when one bee gets close to a flower, other bees don't approach it. Proximity seems to matter. If you come into this room and there's somebody that's very crowded and you notice somebody gets up and walks away, do you immediately sit in the empty seat, or do you say, are they coming back? We're respecting somehow that person's claim to the seat, even though there's no legal right to it, but we feel they may own it because they were there first. All right, finally, investment of self in the target. Did I create it? Creation is the most obvious and perhaps most powerful way to invest of oneself. There's lots of literature showing the difference that we behave differently with earned money than with found money. With earned money, you've invested yourself in it, which tends to create a feeling of ownership of that money. The factors are complementary and additive, and it's not clear which one is more effective, which again is typical of most psychology stuff. Well, these things kind of matter, but we don't know exactly how it's playing out. So what do? We use we modify slightly the Oxaby and Sparagon procedures for earning endowments and giving and taking gains. So let's see, in the giving game, the dictator completes the quiz and earns either $10, $20, or $40. We hand them the money. We ask them to count it and put the money in their wallet. So we're trying to get not only creation, but also intimacy with the money. And the taking game, with the recipient does the quiz, we give the recipient the money. We tell them to count it and put it in their wallet, pocket, or purse. Then the dictator decides whether to give from his earnings to the person or to take from the recipient's earnings. And we shuffle a bunch of envelopes back and forth. We make people take the money out of their wallet, pocket, or purse, put it in an envelope, and transfer it over there. And the other side verifies that the amount that they said they sent is in fact the amount in the envelope. We try to keep everything double blind. We're running, it was a pretty labor-intensive exercise on the taking game, because we needed like 4 people to keep everything double blind. So after the decisions are made, we then ask people, we ask both participants to answer a standard psychological instrument set of questions, and here are 3 of them. There's 9 questions we ask in total. One is, I feel like this is my money on a scale of 1 to 7. 7 indicates the strongest feeling, 1 the least. I feel like this is another person's money. I think the other person feels this is her money. Results. I'm going to go through the average payoff to the participants. I'm going to go through the recipients and dictators' feelings of ownership, and talk a little bit about the link between feelings of ownership and taking for dictators. When the recipient works, the average payoff to the recipient is 41% of the earnings. Oxaby and Sparagon report 49%. The amount the recipient receives also rises with earnings. It goes from 50 to 33 to 38. We only have a few data points in the $10 range. When the dictator works, the recipient gets 21% of the earnings. Again, this compared with Oxaby's finding of 0. But again, we still see a significant increase in the recipient's payoffs holding endowment constant, or holding earnings constant, in the taking game to the giving game. We see significant differences in the feelings of ownership. When the recipient earned the money, the dictator, or the recipient, had a pretty strong, is that going to work? I don't know how to make the red thing work. Oh, well. When the recipient earned the money, recipient said, yeah, I think it's my money on 5.3 on the scale of 1 to 7. Dictator said, I think it's my money 3.3. Much weaker, stronger the feelings. Let's go across. When the dictator earned the money, it flipped around. Recipient was 3.6, dictator 5.3. So we see that the difference in the treatments does affect feelings of ownership. There appears to be some link between the feelings of ownership and taking for the dictators. So here I've got the horizontal axis measures. I feel like this is my money. That's what the dictator feels about, yes, the money. Do I think it's my money? And the vertical axis is measuring the proportion taken. If I think it's my money, I'm more likely to take more according to our hypothesis. So you'd expect there to be sort of a general upward trend to the right, and that it's plenty of variation, but there is a general upward trend. We haven't done any statistical tests because we're still collecting data. Second, link between feelings of ownership and giving for dictators. If the dictator thinks it's my money, we would expect them to give less. We'd expect there to be sort of a general downward trend as you move to the right. We see that general downward trend as we go to the right. And here we talk about what does the dictator feel about the recipient's ownership and giving. I feel this is her money. Well, if I think it's your money, I would probably tend to give you more. We expect there to be a positive upward trend. There's a positive upward trend there. Some potential and very preliminary implications for charitable giving. If you want somebody to give money to you, do what you can to weaken the donor's feeling that she owns the money. University. You want to convince the person who's made a lot of money that their training and experience at the university made them successful. It's not their money, it's our money because we helped you get there. You want to identify a target audience with weak feelings of ownership. My casual experience is if you talk to people who do real estate development, some of them just say, I am so lucky. All these people go bankrupt and I have made a right choice. It was fantastic. Other people say, I got there by hard work and being smarter than the person out working them, I have a feeling the person who says, I'm so lucky is more likely to feel less ownership and more likely to give. And finally, strengthen the donor's feeling that she owns the charity. Make it part of her extended self. We talked earlier about ask them what they want to do. Maybe let them guide you. The more that they feel that they own the charity, the more likely it is they're going to think that their money doesn't belong to them as much as it belongs to my extended self, and you're now in it. And I'm out of time, right? Any questions? Fire. No. Okay, so what happened was they had to put the money into another envelope. It had an ID number on it, and then the envelope was transferred back to the dictators. The dictators counted it and verified that the amount in the envelope was the amount that they took. and nobody reported to us a difference. And as best we can tell, we have a hard time piecing it all back, because we do get receipts, but the ordinance requires them to sign receipt. The receipts matched what the decision sheets looked like. So to our knowledge, everyone did what they were supposed to do. That make sense?
It does raise a question about the feelings of ownership. If the recipients had walked in the lab and you asked them to cough up the money out of their wallets they walked in the door with, my guess is that you would have met substantial resistance.
Right. We've toyed with the idea of telling people to bring $20 to the lab when they start and then taking money from them. But we fear that would,
A lot of us have thought of that.
yeah. We fear that would shut down the lab pretty quickly, and I'm not sure I could get it through IRB. So.
$10 as well.
Thank you.